Welcome, everybody. Today, we're here again to talk about real estate and how it affects the divorce process and what remedies you could utilize throughout the process. And I'm happy to introduce to you two of our relationships that we have in our resource center. The first one being Kathryn Hoffman. Welcome, Kathryn. How are you today?
Oh, I'm great. Thanks a lot, Gwen, for inviting me.
Sure. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Oh, certainly. Well, I am a realtor with Century 21 affiliated, and I work the western suburbs and the southwestern and far western suburbs of the greater Chicagoland area. I'm specifically trained in the divorce field as far as with listing and helping buyers also buy real estate. I've been a realtor for 23 years, so I've been through the highs and the lows and the highs and the lows and back to the highs again. So I'm developing this niche in the divorce field, and it's a very worthwhile endeavor to be in. I like helping people and gotten the training to provide that significantly.
That's very good. And certainly it is a whirlwind of emotions as well. You know, it's not just the market up and down,
No, it is
it's also
not.
the emotions of the people involved. We also have with us our friend Larry LoVotere. And Larry, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Gwen. Thanks for having me today. I'm a vice president of mortgage lending with Guaranteed Rate, and I've been helping people with their mortgage financing needs for about 19 years now. I'm also a certified divorce lending professional and a divorce mortgage planner, and I specialize in helping clients who are going through a divorce.
That's fantastic. You know, and it's really important if you're listening and you're in the process of divorce, you recently finished up, is to get people who have the certifications and the experience dealing with the divorce process, because it really is unique. And there's a lot of factors there that have to be, considered as you move forward. So Kathryn, starting with you, we obviously know that buying a home can be an overwhelming process. And, people have recently been through a divorce. They might be having those emotional issues tied to their past home, and moving forward sometimes becomes difficult. So how does that process add to the stress? And tell us a little bit about that process.
Well, buying a home and getting your current home sold can be stressful anyway, with nothing happening except that you both want to move forward in your lives and buy a new home. But you throw in the fact that a couple is seeking a divorce, so the divorce might be in the future, or there already are several ways down the line in their divorce process, and the stress it is one of the top 5 stressors that can be. So my training as a certified divorce real estate specialist helps me to understand what they're going through, and I'm trained to handle the bumps and to also understand what you as the attorney are working with them. And I assist you by basically staying out of your lane and helping them to move forward with their life.
Sure. And Larry, certainly not just buying, but then when you get into the mortgage process, there's a whole new set of stressors. So can you address that as well?
Yeah, for sure. There's already, that certain level of uncertainty for the client, as to what life is going to look like, post-divorce, including, where they're going to live. And then, they worry about, whether they can afford a home, whether they can even qualify for mortgage financing to buy one. And then on top of that, once they're under contract to purchase a home, the mortgage financing approval process itself can be very stressful. Signing application forms, providing the lender with supporting documentation, and then waiting and worrying while the file is in processing and underwriting. Meanwhile, they have all these other things associated with the divorce process going on, and still maintaining a home and taking care of the kids and all of that.
Sure. And there are some really unique issues, though, that also relate to income, and including child support and maintenance factors as well.
Yes, those are key challenges for the mortgage professional. And at that stage of things, a lot of unanswered questions, and we don't know, if they have sufficient income sources to qualify. The client doesn't know. And so, that adds a tremendous amount of stress.
Sure. And then Kathryn, in this particular market where homes are going so quickly, I think that we can all agree, and the prices being almost out of control in some regards, as the taping of this, which is April the 5th, so of 22. And what's interesting to me is how is it that we see those adding on as stressors? I mean, should you look for a home before the divorce is finalized? What do you advise people?
Well, I advise people to not jump too soon. The first thing I ask is, where are you in the divorce process? Have you just filed? Because it's a lot of times their first reaction is they want to, especially the wife, with maybe if they're thinking they're going to keep the kids and the husband is going to be the out spouse. Their first reaction may be that they want to stay in the home, but maybe as a little bit further down the line, they realize that the home is going to need to be sold, or that they need to go look for a home. But I caution them to not do that too quickly, because there's so many factors in there. And I don't want them to get distressed being too involved in the real estate market, because they might be watching rates go up and down. They might be watching prices seemingly going out of their price range, and they really don't know, because they haven't got the divorce decree worked out yet to know what they actually are going to receive in the settlement proceedings. And so they really don't know. And to head out too soon, I think it'd be an additional stressor for them. So if I find out somebody is brand new, and they just really want to get out there and look at homes, I really caution them, because there's an abundance of websites on there, including my own, that they can go on and look for homes and watch homes go come on the market, go off the market, and then see what they sold for. So until that they have an idea of what they're going to get in the settlement, and then they're going to have to talk to someone like Larry, who's a divorce professional in the lending side of it. It really is not. It would be an additional stress on top of it to go out too soon and look for a home.
So Larry, that kind of brings me to the next question to you. Is somebody though really wants to purchase this home in their local community? They want to be close to their kids. They have the financial wherewithal, perhaps, to get approved for it. Is it possible for somebody to purchase a home during the course of the divorce?
It is actually, but there are a lot of things that we have to make sure we put in place. And you touched on a couple of them earlier. We have to verify that they have sufficient income sources usable for mortgage qualification. Typical scenarios are, one could be that they're going to be reliant upon maintenance and child support for income to qualify for mortgage financing, but there are guidelines that address when that can be used. And the typical rule is that they need to have received that income source for at least 6 months before we can use it. Often we see one spouse who somewhere along the way during the time of their marriage decided to leave the workforce, stay at home, take care of the kids in the home, and then they recently went back to work. Well, there are guidelines that say that after an extended absence from the workforce, they have to be on the new job for at least 6 months before we can use that income. So we really need to drill down on all those things early on to make sure that everything's in place, so that if they do move forward with buying a home, that we can actually close on the financing for them.
Sure. And then, from an attorney perspective, from a divorce attorney perspective, you also have to deal with the classification of that new piece of property. So if you buy the home, and even if you get a waiver of homestead, if you don't have an order that says that the down payment was an advanced distribution of the marital estate, it is marital property. You are not prohibited necessarily from making that purchase, but now you've purchased an additional asset. In many cases, that's a risk people are willing to run, though, because their position is, I need a home, I want to be in the vicinity, this is in this market, this is something that became available, so they make that purchase, and it's not necessarily a bad idea. It just has ramifications both ways. So it may be that you could figure out a way to make it non-marital property, or it may become marital property, but you do need to consult with your divorce attorney at least to understand what that effect's going to look like.
Without
Absolutely.
question. Yeah, they should speak with you first before doing anything. I call them legal landmines. Otherwise, potentially step on a landmine.
Right. And just to understand, sometimes there's ramifications of the decision you make. It's not that it's impossible, like you said, just like it's not impossible to purchase during the proceedings, but it's something to consider.
Yes.
So then, Larry, I want to go back to you, because now we get into
Sure.
the issue, something that Kathryn spoke about, is there's a possibility one spouse may stay in the home and need to refi. What is that going to look like, and what obstacles are there?
That's a very good question. So we touched on a couple of the obstacles in terms of, being able to document sources of income. But that scenario where we call them the retaining spouse wants to refinance the marital home, remove the other spouse from the mortgage and title, which is one of the key goals of that process. We call that an equity buyout. And excuse me, and it needs to be addressed in the settlement agreement as such. Otherwise, it'll automatically be treated as a cash out refinance. Cash out refinance comes with higher rates and less favorable terms than a rate and term refi does. Rate and term comes with a lower rate, and an equity buyout can be done as a rate and term, again, as long as it's stated in the settlement agreement. And the equity buyout is also used to provide the vacating spouse with their share of the equity in the home. That's why it's called an equity buyout. And so it's a great tool for taking care of that. Otherwise, typically other assets have to be used to make the other party whole for their share of the equity in the house. And with the, I'm sorry, go ahead, Gwen.
No, finish your answer, and then we're going to go back to Kathryn because I got a follow-up.
So with the equity buyout, it also allows us to access more of the equity in the home than a cash out refinance would. And so if you have to go down the road of a cash out refi, you may still need to use other assets in addition to the refi to settle up fairly with the other spouse.
Understood. So here we're running into some issues, Kathryn, where somebody is getting a cash out of some sort, no matter what Larry's able to get them to have, what form of mortgage they're going to take on. So now let's say that the wife or the husband gets bought out and they have to get out of the home within 60 days. Well, that puts a real pressure in given the market, does it not?
It is extraordinarily high pressure at that point. And I really need to have a conversation with them that is there a place for you to go in the interim? Because right now they may not get their first pick of home. It may be the second contract or the fifth contract. And so it may come down to, well, I'll just rent. And it's like, well, let's take a look at that, because rentals are also somewhat the same situation that home sales are right now, that there's a shortage of rentals right now. So, unless they want to couch surf on their buddy's sofa or something, we need to really make consideration of what this move may look like realistically. So I tell people that sometimes I don't always bring good news. I love to make people happy, but I don't always bring good news, but they'll always get the truth from me.
In this market, it's difficult because sometimes when there's been this buyout or the cash out, you have 60 days to relocate from the date you collect the money. So in good faith, you go out and you look for something, but it's not available. Or let's say that the spouse anticipates and the judgment provides that the spouse has 60 days to deliver your equity. And if you don't, then the house is going to go on the market for sale. So it really puts that other spouse in a box in this market because it's difficult to know what to do. So if you get those situations, do you think that they should go back and negotiate that as part of their original agreement with their spouse as part of the divorce process?
I think it deserves being looked at. Frankly, because this is new and this year, it hasn't come up for me personally yet, but I would definitely, it would warrant a phone call to you and, maybe even the three of us on the call and strategize, because it's just not fair to for somebody to wind up homeless because a piece of paper, their settlement says this. So it needs to be a discussion so that it makes sense for everybody involved.
Sure. So Larry, let's say that we provide in the judgment that there is this equity buyout or however that's accomplished. If we had a provision in there that the former spouse would be allowed to stay there maybe 120 days or 150 days, different than what we looked at originally with those 60 days or even 30-day buyouts, is that problematic for the person doing the refi?
So no, actually, and I think that's an awesome solution to a very difficult circumstance that we're handling right now. So no, there's no, extending the period of time, like you just suggested, will not have an impact on the approvability of the mortgage financing for the equity buyout. So I think it's a good suggestion and something to do right now in this environment.
Right, and you don't necessarily want to reduce the maintenance or support of the individual who's going to be going out and making a purchase. Perhaps they can buy back and do a temporary monthly payment for staying there for so long, because you don't want to affect their income either, correct?
Yes, we definitely,
Right.
yeah, definitely
that
don't want to
becomes the
mess with that.
difference. So, yeah, you really have to be careful that you don't back it out and give an adjustment off of a credit. It really needs to be two separate items in the judgment in order to cure that problem, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because I do find that as an issue is that there's not enough time to get out. There's not enough time to buy something and to get moved and to get relocated. So, and outside of getting a storage unit and, you know, couch surfing or staying in an extended stay location like a hotel, you know, it really can become quite difficult to do that in this market.
Yes.
So Kathryn, change the scenario. We're divorced. They both sold the house. You know, everybody walked away. They decided that neither one of them could keep it. They come out, they have some equity, they pay off their bills, which may or may not be a good idea. And you should talk to Larry first about that. I think that's always an issue. Should you keep that cash to put it as a down payment, or should you pay off other bills? But let's just say that they want to go out and they both want to buy something new. What should people be looking at that point, Kathryn?
Well, first, my first call is, have you spoken again to your lender? Because I'm not making a move to show them anything until I have some verification, validation that in what price range they're going to be looking at, how much down payment it is, and then again, a realistic look at what's happening in the market. Last year in October, we'd have a different conversation that we're going to have right now, because the inventory there was some inventory, the market was softening, but the conversation I'd have now is completely different. So I would need to be very, very clear. What is the top price that those folks can buy, and what is their down payment? Because I have to write up an offer and try very hard to get it to convey, because they're going to be in a competitive situation. They aren't going to be the only offer, and the idea of being first anymore is just out the window. It doesn't matter if you're first or 15th, because they're probably going to put a home on the market, say by Thursday, and by Sunday night they're going to be calling for highest and best, and there might be 15 offers. So we want to position the offer with either one of those buyers, and it's probably we're going to be up against cash offers. So we're going to be looking at timeframes, the type of loan, conventional FHA, VA, and just put it out there as best that we can. And so it might not be their dream home and their dream location. I've always counseled people, 85% of what you're looking for in a home, it's welcome home time. But in this time, if you are really serious about wanting a home, it may be just getting a home and not maybe your ideal home at that time. You can always make a change in the future, but right now, sometimes you just have to accept the way things are, and sometimes it takes more than one time out there. And oftentimes I can tell them, suggest to them, urge them, nudge them, have somebody else try to influence them. But oftentimes the best education is for us to go out, take a look, and for them to come to the same realization that I perhaps have known all along. And that's the real education out there, is when they often come back to me and go, well, you know what? I think maybe we ought to take a look at maybe townhomes instead of a single family home or something like that. And it's like, okay, that might be a really good idea. Right. So that's the kind of thing that you have to have a velvet glove. You can't hit somebody over the head. They're already bruised. They've already maybe have been through an ego burst, a lot of emotions always involved. And, I'm here to be support and to guide them along to the best direction that you've set in place with the attorney, and that someone like Larry has set guidelines with by giving a qualified pre-approval.
And I don't care how much income you have, and whether it's, an average American home, or if it's an average American family, or if it's somebody that's going to be more wealthy. When you take one home and you divide it into two, the money's not there as it was before. And that's exactly a very big issue and adjustment process to go through. Larry, you get through with somebody and they're in your office and you're shaking your head thinking you're going to be on the edge. Are there times when people shouldn't make this move? That's a difficult
And
thing
that's,
to
yeah,
talk about with divorce, real estate professionals, but it's a fair question, isn't it?
yes, and there are times when, we'll do the numbers. I always talk about affordability, monthly cash flow. You just touched on it, Gwen. They're used to having two incomes coming in, and now they have half of that. And it changes the numbers, the price range they potentially qualify for. And in some cases, it doesn't make financial sense for them to move forward at that point in time. And that's one of the things that we, will work on with them. We build out all the numbers, show them, what the numbers are, what the price range is that they would qualify for, if any, things that they might have to do to make some changes in order to qualify in the future. One piece of advice I would give everybody, though, is if right now we're talking about, both spouses may be purchasing a home after the divorce is final. Excuse me, I would not wait until after everything is final to look into what they can do from a purchase standpoint. Start long before everything is final. Make sure you understand, what you'll qualify for. If there are other income sources they're going to need, the time to address all of that is very early on in the process. Things could be done at that point that would put both spouses in a better position to qualify post-divorce. But if we wait until after the divorce is final, it's often very difficult to get any changes or revisions made to the settlement agreement in the way it's worded and structured to put them in a better position to qualify.
All right. So at what point, Larry, in the divorce process, do you think they ought to start considering seeing you?
I think very early on, while the divorce is in the early stages. We can determine a lot of different things for them. They'll know exactly the timeline that they'll need in order to close on financing. They'll know the income that they need, and they'll know the price range they should target. They'll know if it's affordable or not. And there are things that we can do. So for example, there's something called a contingent liability. So we can identify which spouse will be responsible for certain parts of their debt, so that it's only counted against one spouse instead of both. And so an example is one spouse is going to retain the marital home, but they're not going to refinance the mortgage for a variety of reasons. They keep it, but they're both maybe on title and the mortgage to that current home. But one spouse is going to vacate that residence and wants to go and buy something else. Unless a contingent liability court-ordered assignment of debt is put in place, we have to count the existing mortgage against that vacating spouse's qualifying numbers for the new mortgage they're going to use to buy their new residence. So that's an example of something that can be easily fixed early on. But if we wait until everything's final, then we're stuck with playing the cards we're dealt. So the earlier you involve all the divorce professionals on the divorce team, the better chance you have of a successful outcome later on.
And Kathryn, I think I heard you address that earlier on, is you're first going to send them over to Larry to say, what can you afford? Because it really is unrealistic to just be blindly out there searching a market that you have no idea what's affordable, right?
Exactly. That's going to be my first suggestion to them. In fact, I will not step out into home number one with them until they've visited a lender, particularly someone that understands the divorce process, such as Larry and his training, because it's going to be disappointing for them. Oftentimes people think they can afford much more than what they think they can. And, their lifestyle is going to change regardless of income. There's going to be a change. And it's sometimes the uncertainty. They want to have some sort of structure in their life because the whole world seems to be crashing in around them. So they're looking for certainty. And their first reaction is, I want to go out and look at homes. But, it's just not. It's not realistic for them. And I'm not doing them any benefit by taking them out into the market and setting expectations that may be completely dashed, and they're going to be angry about it. They're going to be disappointed, and maybe not necessarily angry at me, because oftentimes I'll get the brunt of that anger, and I'll just say, are you angry at me, or are you upset about the situation? And it's like, oh, no, I'm not upset at, I'm not angry at you, but there is a disappointment factor there. So I like to get ahead of it.
Yeah.
And the first thing I'm going to do is send them to Larry.
And doing that also gives them a great sense of peace of mind. If they look into the financing early on, they know they qualify for mortgage financing. 2, they know the price range that they'll be able to target. They know that it'll be affordable based on the income that they have coming in versus the debt going out. It's a great peace of mind step to take early on. They don't have to worry about that piece of it. They feel a lot better after they've taken that step. They know that, okay, at least this piece of it is going to play out the way I'm hoping for, because I've already looked into it. Financing is there. One of the things we'll also do is we'll have the client's file fully underwritten, not just a pre-approval. We'll fully underwrite the file for them, so they're not worried about what's going to happen when their file eventually goes to underwriting. They've already got that out of the way as well.
Mhm.
So they can, it's a very stressful time, as we talked about earlier, but at least that piece of it, we can calm those fears and let them enjoy the house shopping experience and not worry about what's going to happen when it gets to the underwriter's desk.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and as a divorce attorney, I would add a couple other things. If you have children, you've got a distance that you've got to stay in. Maybe your parenting agreement provides for what school the children need to remain in. It could trigger a review. Moving into a new area could be opening up the litigation again on so many different levels. So you have to look at it with the real estate in mind, but you also have to look at it with the totality of your settlement agreement in mind.
Right.
Is this going to work? Is this doable? Can we really co-parent on a 50-50 basis if we live 10 miles apart? And 10 miles apart could be, as the crow flies, a much different distance, but you put that timing out there to get that child to school by 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, that 10-mile drive, which might be permissible under your agreement, becomes what should be a 40-mile drive because of timing and traffic.
Mhm.
There are so many factors to consider. And that's what I also encourage people to listen to, is when you're going and you're looking at the future and making plans, look at it in the totality of your circumstances too.
Mhm.
What is best for the kids? What does my agreement provide for? If I add somebody onto title or get somebody to co-sign or add on, is it going to affect my support in the first place? Because there's so many different factors that could influence as well. What else in wrapping up, Kathryn, would you say to somebody who's going through the process and is just looking at the market and shaking their heads and they're worried about rates, they're worried about inventory? What's the first piece? How do you calm down and look at this differently through a different window pane?
If at all possible, to look at things in a rational way, because I know from being a divorced person myself that a lot of emotion can get in there and a lot of anger can get in there. And the most important thing that you can do right now is to protect your credit, because not only will credit affect purchasing a house, but it also affects, as Larry will confirm, what interest rate you're going to get. But even if you decide not to buy, if let's say you're a non-working spouse within that marriage, if you go out into the job market, they may be looking at your credit. So if you have decided that, maybe through the divorce settlement that you're responsible for this amount of debt, but you're going to get back at him or he's going to get back at her and not pay something, well, that destroys both of your credit. And the most precious thing you can do right now is to protect that credit, pay your bills, grit your teeth, pay your bills, pay them on time, and not let your credit drop, so that when this is all over, you can move forward in whatever capacity that is out there for you to do so. And you'll be so glad. You will be so glad that you did that, because we always have that acronym about the most important thing in real estate is location. Well, in this regard, your most important thing, I feel, is protecting your credit.
Very interesting perspective. And Larry, what would you add as a wrap up to somebody just going through this and feeling overwhelmed?
And, while it can be, a stressful experience, the whole divorce process, and then you add on the real estate piece of it, it still makes financial sense to own rather than rent. So, it's even though it's some work, it still makes sense to pursue home ownership. And as it relates to, interest rates, I know, there's been a lot of talk about how rates are going up. I think it's important to put that in perspective. If we look at the the long-term picture of where the 30-year fixed rate has been. There are a lot of folks that remember the days of 13, 14% interest rates, and you paid points to get it. And going back even a little bit further, people were getting 18 and 20% interest rates, and you had to put 20% down.
Mhm.
So even though we have rates in the fours, they're in the fours. They're not
Right.
14%. We're minus 10%. They're in the fours. Minimum down payment options are available. So, if you just put things in perspective, yes, rates have gone up a little bit, but it's still a great time. I'm envious of those folks that can buy a house with 4% interest rates, because they can buy so much more home than
Mhm.
could back in the
Yeah.
day. So,
It's a good
don't let
perspective to look at. Don't let yourself become overwhelmed. Look at it. Look at the long term. Just like if you're looking at the stock market, you can't take 1 year out. We can't look at 08 and say, oh, here's where it is. You have to look at it over a course of many years. Same is true with real
That's
estate.
right.
Too.
Yep.
I think that's a good statement. Well, thank you for your time so much today. I know that I learned something, and I hope that our audience did as well. And if you're out there and you're going through a divorce, you need to assemble a good team. And I highly recommend Larry and Kathryn to you, because I think that they can formulate a remedy for you. Sometimes we just feel paralyzed and we need to know and what to do next, and have some guidance to make informed decisions. Don't go out there and just jump at the first thing that you see. Make sure that you're analyzing it and taking the time to determine what's in your best interest. So thanks again for your time. We really appreciate it today.
You're welcome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Gwen, for having me.
Sure.